Here for our behavioral health department in City of Hope, Chicago. And I'm really excited to present grief during the holidays for you. I know this is a topic that a lot of patients have brought up, even caregivers too. So we definitely want to make sure that we have some great resources for you and can dive into all the things that encompass this during the holiday season. So I'd like to start with this quote: "A grief is perhaps the last and final translation of love." And I think this really encompasses, that feeling that we have when we lose someone and that pain that really hits us down into our soul and just makes us look at the world in a whole different way. So any form of loss is associated with grief. So I don't think we often look at it that way. Usually when we think of grieving, we think, okay, someone passed away or, our pet passed away. It's usually associated with death. However, we can grieve our health, especially for our patients. You're going through a lot of changes with the cancer diagnosis, and there's a lot of things that are out of your control. Certainly loved ones, fertility. I have a lot of younger patients that we work with for fertility preservation. And, they question, do I get to be a parent? I'm fighting for my life now too. Relationships, even a divorce is a loss or a death to a relationship. So when we're looking at, all those changes that happen along the way, it's important to recognize all of those things that impact us, our physical abilities. If so many patients that aren't able to do what they used to do, they can't lift as heavy of objects, or they're not able to perform in their household tasks the way they used to. So that's a huge role change too. Socialization. Had quite a few people, just because of compromised immune systems, they don't go out anymore, so they have that social isolation now, which is also a huge loss. Finances. We typically, when we're doing our monthly or yearly budget, aren't thinking about cancer if we're not diagnosed with it. So then when you get that diagnosis, you're really diving in saying, okay, I have all these extra expenses and I don't know where that money's coming from because I'm not able to work as much, or I can't work at all. Disability hasn't kicked in, or I'm waiting for FMLA, whatever it might be. Our homes, there could be changes within our living environment, or if you can't afford the rent or the mortgage, or you need to downsize. And certainly too, it impacts our dreams, our future plans. If you're dealing with a diagnosis that is consuming a lot of your time to go through treatment, the plans that you made for the future are going to shift. And there might be some other things too that come to mind for you as we're moving through. Although we do have a lot of different forms of grief that we're looking at. For today, we're predominantly going to focus on the loss of loved ones. However, all of these topics will certainly intertwine within all of the things we discuss. So David Kessler and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross are the two people that really paved the foundation for the stages of death and dying. They did a lot of work, and with that, they looked at those stages. They found that they parallel the stages of grief. So we have denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. However, with grief, there's a lot of work that David Kessler did around finding meaning, and that's a very important piece. So when we're looking at where you are in your grief, I'll invite you to just take a few minutes to kind of look at this list. Has your grief hit you yet? Do you still need time and to let this pain change for you? Is your grief right on time? Knowing also that there is no timetable for grief. There is no right or wrong. This is just to help you get an idea of where you are, or even some of those beliefs you're creating around where you should be right now in your grief. Around the timetable too. Do you think it's lasting too long? Do you feel as though you're stuck? You're not really moving forward and you're just letting time and life kind of start passing by? Or do you feel like you're backsliding? I've had some patients that said, I thought I was really doing well and now it's hitting me different, or I think I'm going back to where I was when it first started, especially around the holidays. If you lost someone around the holidays, there's this contradiction between, I want to be happy and celebrate, but I'm also sad that this person isn't here with me. Is my grief healing? That is an important piece too. I've had a lot of people that have tried to hold on to the pain of the grief because they feel that that's what keeps them connected to the person they lost. And then grief is part of me, but it doesn't define me. So really that's, I think, part of that finding meaning piece. And, as you're looking at those list of bullet points, even just, ask yourself, where do you think you should be in your grief? And what do you think others, friends, family, society believe about your grief? And then lastly, how do your current relationships with grief differ from the shoulds, both inside you and around you? So this is very helpful to kind of tease apart some of those beliefs that we come up with, or the judgments that we might feel are coming from other people and might be coming from other people. People that don't understand the grief might say, well, they died 5 years ago. You should be beyond that. Well, depending on the relationship and the depth of it, you may never recover from it. If it's a loss of a child, that's going to sting very differently than the loss of a grandparent who was, 110, where you've seen they lived a huge, long, beautiful life. And although you miss them, we can conceptualize that a little bit easier. So some of the common feelings we have when we're in that grief are feeling alone, detached, or distrustful of others, trouble pursuing interests or planning for the future, feeling like life is meaningless or empty, even losing part of your identity or your sense of purpose. If you've lost, especially like a child or a spouse, that identity changes. You're no longer a mother or a wife or a husband. You're trying to look at, okay, I'm a widow. I had a child, or maybe I had 3 kids. Now I have 2, whatever it is. So there's definitely a lot of changes happening there. And there could be shame or guilt around, the loss as well. And I think that goes back to some of those beliefs we create. Well, I should be further along in this process, or I shouldn't be talking about this. It's going back to all those shoulds. I always tell my patients, stop shoulding on yourself. You don't need to, put that shame and guilt on a natural process, and trying to find a deeper understanding within that process. And then definitely, feeling unable to express those true feelings. A lot of times, we wear a mask. You're walking around the grocery store and you're not going to be sitting there crying, even though internally you might feel as if everything is broken. So it is definitely important too to find those places where you can express and feel. And then, feeling like a burden to others or unwanted. I've had quite a few patients that talk about wanting to speak about the person that they lost and hesitating to because they feel that they're talking about them too much, or people are annoyed by it. I always tell my patients, like, talk about that person as much as possible. That's what keeps their memory alive and really allows you to stay connected to them. And you never know, there can be some really fun conversations that come out of that, and shared memories, which also help in that grieving process. This is the feeling wheel. And I really like this tool because it helps us look at all those different emotions. And, one of the things that you can do even for yourself is, as you're looking at that, think about what 3 to 4 feelings best describe your state of mind since your loved one passed away. And as you're looking at that, even recognizing what feelings you might fear could take over. I know sadness or a depression are very common for people. They're worried about getting into that dark hole or place where they can't climb back out. And, if you're recognizing that or have that fear, that's really great because you're going to be able to prevent that too. A lot of times it's, people that are so lost in the emotions are not even recognizing them. And that's where they really do get into that very depressed state. And it's important too to recognize what feelings you avoid or find yourself stuffing. It goes back to wearing that mask or trying to put on that happy face. If you feel really sad or frustrated, angry, a lot of times we don't express those emotions. They're looked at as negative versus positive, where you're joyful and happy. And if you recall the Disney Pixar movie Inside Out, the first one, they just came out with the second one, but they had 5 core emotions, and they had the anger, disgust, fear, sadness, and joy. And if you look at those 5 emotions, joy would only be the only one that would be classified as quote unquote positive, where the rest of them would then be considered negative. However, the moral of that movie, if you haven't seen it, the little girl Riley, who is the main character, had to experience sadness in order to know joy. And that's the same with all those other emotions too. We need to move through those things and experience them in order to find that acceptance and that happiness and that contentness with life. So it is important as you're going through your grieving process too, to recognize those feelings that you might be trying to avoid or not express so that you don't have as much attention drawn to you, or you might not even know how to access those. It might be something that, however you were grown up, it was part of your family tradition. We do not cry, or, we don't express these certain things. So it is important to give yourself that permission and to recognize how you respond to each of those different feelings and emotions. So transitioning into holiday stress, some of those common stressors could be, that end of the year rush to get things done. All the bills seem to be coming in all at the same time, and then you're trying to balance, all right, we have to, get presents for everyone. And there could be more financial concerns there too. Or even, you've met your deductible for this year, but January 1st comes and we're looking at a whole new deductible. So those financial worries are there. Balancing time for travel, gatherings, treatment, and life in general, and knowing that there could be more restrictions on there too, especially with the travel, depending on where you are in your treatment. Then there's those mixed emotions, especially if you've had a lot of loss around, the holiday time. There's that mixed emotion I mentioned before of wanting to celebrate and then also being sad that some aren't there to celebrate with you. And trying to keep all your family traditions. And I know a lot of things get passed on from generation to generation, or there might have been a dish that grandma always made and she's not here anymore. So how do we keep that alive? And no one can make it like her. So it's figuring out what you can do to honor those old memories, but also create new memories for, the future generations, and different ways that you can tweak those recipes or family traditions. So I love this image because it really shows the effect of stress on our body, mind, emotions, and behaviors. A lot of times we think it's just a mental thing, or I feel stressed because my neck got a little tight. And it's incredible to see how it's all intertwined in there. A lot of my patients, when they're starting to feel stressed, they won't be sleeping as well. They might have nightmares or an increase in anxiety. Our mood becomes a little bit more irritable. You can't concentrate as much. Your eating habits change. You might be eating more. If you're a stress eater, you might be eating less. So there's different ways that everyone copes with stress. And then there's definitely, those maladaptive coping skills. You might be grabbing an extra glass of wine to get through the night, or, increase in, drinking in general, smoking, even, that emotional eating piece. So there's a lot of things that we do that aren't always positive things for our bodies, but definitely later on, he'll get into some of the different transitional things that you can do too. So we dive deeper into that impact on the mind and body. As I mentioned, that change in the appetite or sleep, your physical activities may change. You might become disengaged or detached, maybe not even really feeling like you want to be involved in anything. Especially with that extra stress of the holidays. I've had some people say, I don't even care about them anymore. I don't want to be part of it. Even just feeling, a pressure to be motivated for things versus not having that motivation. As you're going through treatment, your body goes through a lot of changes, and fatigue is one of the main ones that so many of my patients have talked about. And when you have that fatigue, it's hard to want to get up and do things. And our mood changes, that irritability or increased sadness. If you're on any treatments that impact your hormones, you could be up and down all around throughout the whole day. Your perspective changes. Things that you thought were really important 5 years ago, since your diagnosis, might not feel as important anymore. So it's important to look at those changes and the vicarious trauma. So a lot of times we overlook this piece, and the vicarious trauma is when we hear about other people's experiences and we take that on ourselves. And I know for a lot of my patients, they wear their hearts on their sleeve, and a lot of people do. And it can be a little bit more challenging too as you're going through your treatment and you've met some really great friends that are also going through treatment and you might be doing really well and they're not doing as well. And then this guilt comes in too, or you start taking on a lot of their agony and struggles just because you're empathetic. So that's an important thing to look at too and make sure that you are managing and balancing your body. So how do we cope? So definitely staying mindful to balance those activities. So a very important thing is to maintain realistic expectations for yourself and others. Now, a lot of times when we have such high expectations, we get disappointed very easily. So it is important to keep that in check. Put yourself first. I know for a lot of people that's difficult. And I've had so many clients say, I feel selfish if I'm putting myself first. However, if you're on an airplane, one of the first things they tell you before takeoff is in case of emergency, put your oxygen mask on first and then help the person next to you. And this is the same thing. Taking care of yourself, that self-care is selfless. It is not selfish. So that is a really important thing to remember too. And plan ahead however you can. You don't have to have everything laid out, but if it helps you to put things on the calendar, to balance it out, to make sure that you have everything done by the time the holidays come, that's wonderful. And definitely keep a good budget so that that financial stress doesn't hit you as hard. Allowing yourself some of that downtime. So it goes back with that self-care piece and listening to what your body's telling you. Eat consciously. So you're not, grabbing all the holiday cookies and treats and things, but you're really looking at, okay, what am I putting in my body? What's going to still be nutritional? Can I limit the amount of intake of the more holiday non-healthy things versus trying to eat all of them because they only come around once a year? And honoring the loved ones that you lost. I've had quite a few patients that will set a place at the table for a family member, especially if they were lost this year, or they have the picture there, or a couple pictures around on a nearby table or cabinet, just so that those loved ones are still part of the celebration. The memory of them is still there. And certainly, too, reflecting on the true meaning and spirit of the holidays. I've had some patients that were so worried that because of all the financial strain, they weren't able to buy as many presents as they used to. And I had one, she started doing crafts and things while she was going through her infusion and decided, this is what I'm going to give to all my family members for Christmas. And they truly appreciated that more than the PlayStation or those really expensive like getting an electric scooter, whatever it might be. That it wasn't about the money, it was about the meaning behind it. And I think that's a really important thing to remember too, is putting yourself into those gifts means a lot more to the people and creates better memories too than buying the latest and the newest fad. Another important thing is managing your sleep, making sure that you have a good sleep routine. Quality sleep really needs, a set schedule, making sure that at least a half hour before you go to bed, you're shutting off all the technology. You're not watching the TV to fall asleep to it. You're not sitting there scrolling on your phone still. And the importance with that too is, that blue light on the screen keeps your brain active. If you're falling asleep listening to the TV, the sound is still going to keep your brain going and processing because it's trying to manage all of that information that's coming in. So finding different ways to relax before you go to bed and creating that routine. I have some patients that will do some gentle stretching, nothing overly vigorous, just because you don't want to wake up your entire body, but some gentle yoga to help you calm the body, doing a little bit of meditation. Some of my patients will actually soak their feet in warm Epsom salt water and read a book. And when the water cools down, they say, all right, now it's time for me to take my shower and go to bed. So it's really figuring out what works for you. And also too, making sure that the room temperature is controlled. You don't want it too hot or too cold. If it's too cold, you're going to be shivering and not being able to get some good sleep. And if it's too hot, it might be great and snuggly when you first fall asleep, but you're going to wake up in the middle of the night sweating and throwing the blankets off, which a lot of our patients experience too with the hot flashes that are, medically induced, or even just the natural hot flashes and things that happen. Some of those benefits too, it boosts your brain activity, increases the energy. You strengthen your immune system. You're going to be in a better mood, have higher productivity, just because you're going to be present and functioning. And your body's going to say, all right, I'm energetic. I was able to recuperate and get myself ready for this next day. So some tips we have for coping and recovery, definitely seeking out supports. You could do telemedicine, employee assistance programs, counseling services, and we have that at City of Hope. Using technology to stay connected with family and friends. I know this became really big, especially during the pandemic times. We were all quarantined and couldn't see anybody. And that was the one thing we were craving, is just that human interaction. So even being able to do some FaceTime with your family members so that you can see them and say hi. One thing that I did, I have family in Florida. So during that time, my parents would get on their FaceTime. I was on mine. My brother's family was on theirs, and we would all play Candyland. So we all pulled out our own Candyland boards and we were going through, and it was really fun just to play a board game, even virtually. So it's a great way too to, be creative and say, okay, how can we stay connected even if we are far away or we can't travel this year, but this is something that we can do to keep those traditions or connections alive. And definitely adopting those daily habits to support your mind and body. I always tell my patients and caregivers when I first meet them, if I never see you again, please take one thing of advice away, and that's to do one thing for yourself every single day. And it doesn't have to be anything huge or elaborate. It could be as simple as taking a deep breath or doing a body scan in the morning before you get out of bed, saying, how does my body feel today? How did I sleep? Do my eyes feel like they're wide awake and open, or do they feel a little bit more droopy? How's my breathing? Does it feel like it's just flowing through my body, or is it stuck in my chest? Is there tightness or tension in any parts of my body? So that's a really great way too to start tapping in and saying, okay, what's happening? Let me bring more of my own body awareness into my day. You can also, do some meditation, and it doesn't have to be, sitting in the room humming. A lot of times people think of that as meditation, but you can go for a walk, or when you're having a morning cup of coffee or tea, it's really being present in that moment. So, taking that sip, smelling the aroma, feeling the warmth as it's going down your throat. And if you're sitting outside, being aware of what's happening in nature. Are there birds flying over? Do you see a rabbit hopping across your yard? So it's just allowing you to be present in the moment. And you might be reevaluating your goals and priorities. I think we do that in general. However, as we're, dealing with and facing cancer, whether as a patient or a caregiver, we really start shifting and looking at things in a different way. And that's okay. I think that's a great way too to say, okay, what is really important right now? And establishing and maintaining those healthy boundaries. That can be very challenging, especially with loved ones. I've had quite a few patients say, I really appreciate all this help and support that my family is giving, but it feels like they're helicoptering around me. I can tie my own shoes, I can brush my own teeth. So it is being able to still express like what you're able to do and what you're looking for assistance if you need that. It may also be limiting the amount of time you spend with people. If you have someone in your life that, you talk to them on the phone, but it feels draining for you, you might have to limit that and say, what, I only have 5 minutes today. Or mid-conversation, you might even just have to say, I really have to go. Like, we're going to have to continue this later. And I know that can be very challenging to do, especially with loved ones. They might not understand. It might come across as being rude. That is an important thing too, to take care of yourself. And it's also too, as you're trying to go through treatment and everything, people flooding you with information, or I read this article. So even having a forum that can just be about cancer. And that's a really great healthy boundary too, because if people call and want to talk to you about the cancer, they're one person, but they might not be taking into consideration the other 15 people that just called you. So if you have a forum for cancer, you can say, you know what, this is a place we do, Caring Bridge or a Facebook page or something where, this is where all the updates are. Now tell me about your kids. Tell me about, the sports team that your son's trying out for, whatever it might be. And that's a great way too to continue living versus allowing that cancer to take over. Tapping into your creativity, like I mentioned, my one patient creating a bunch of crafts and things to give as gifts. So when you're able to tap into your creative mind, you shut off that logic and reasoning, which is usually where our anxiety and stress lives. And that creative mind just allows you to take that step back and breathe. I always tell people that it's similar to when you're a little kid and they gave you a cardboard box. You took it outside and all of a sudden you're in outer space. That's the creative mind you want to be in. It's just being able to say, all right, I'm taking a break from reality. I'm going to go, I'm going to the moon today. If you need to climb into a cardboard box to do it, fine. It's definitely figuring out what you need for that and taking time off for it. A gratitude journal also. This is a really great intervention I've used with so many of my patients. And all you do is have a notebook or journal next to your bed. And before you go to sleep, you write down 3 things you're grateful for that day. And if you're having a hard day, you can always go back to that journal and read back on all the things that you're grateful for. And they don't have to be anything huge or earth shattering. It can be, hey, I just heard I have no evidence of disease, which is incredible. It can also be, I had a refreshing glass of water. It rained today and it smelled so fresh. A stranger smiled at me and held the door. So it's really looking at your entire day and those little things that you can pick up. Even a bird flew in the window and I felt like he was talking to me. So it's really looking at all those little things to be grateful for. And of course, too, actively grieving our losses. So, I showed you the list earlier of all the things that, could be forms of loss, your health, your finances, homes, dreams, physical abilities. And it's giving yourself that permission to grieve that. Even the changes of, okay, now I have to be a little bit more conscious of where I go. I shouldn't be in huge crowds, or I need to take extra precautions now when I go out, where before I could just go and do everything and I didn't have to think about it. So that's really important too, to be able to go back and look at all of that stuff. So some daily practices. I know I talked a little bit about, the meditation and the gratitude journal. Definitely, counseling and therapy. Getting some movement into your life. So you can do, like the yoga, qigong, going for walks. If you can get to the gym, that's great too. Like different, swimming classes, things that can get the body moving, increasing the blood flow and helping you feel a little bit more alive. Laughter also. I think laughter is one of the best medicines and it looks different for everybody. So, laughter might be for you being able to just get together with an old friend who always makes you laugh, or, you have a bunch of inside jokes that help you guys connect. Or it could be watching your favorite comedy or sharing it with, your kids or your grandkids where they get to experience it for the first time. And you get to laugh even at the reactions, because a lot of the movies that you might love are now probably dated and the humor is a little bit different. So there's a lot of really great ways to take care of yourself. And this certainly is not an extensive list. There's so many different things. Even one thing too, if you are more of a researcher and you tend to, you get your diagnosis and you're going down all those rabbit holes in the Google search engine. A great way to take care of yourself is to search relaxation modalities instead of the medical stuff, because all of those little rabbit holes you get into will just show you different ways of taking care of yourself versus things that might contradict each other. Like, don't eat tomatoes, eat tomatoes. Oh, well, you have this life expectancy, different things that will increase that stress. And we want to keep that at a minimum as much as possible, just so that you are taking care of yourself. And then the healthy mind platter. So looking at breaking down the platter here, this is actually, I'm going to go back real quick so you can look at it, just the whole picture. So this is the platter for your brain. So a lot of times when we meet with nutrition, they'll tell you to eat the rainbow. And this is the rainbow that in our behavioral health department, we'll tell you not to eat, but to implement in your everyday practice. As we look at breaking down the platter, focus time, this is really looking at breaking down, those goals, things that, are on your to-do list. What do you need to help you to connect and get through those goals? The playtime, allowing yourself to be creative and playful, enjoying, all those moments. And, this goes back to, playing those board games, like I was doing virtually with my family or getting outside. I had one patient, she had ovarian cancer. And when she was 10, her parents got divorced and she had a younger brother, and she decided that she was going to go live with her dad at that time. And she felt like mom could take care of herself. Dad needs someone to help clean the house, make the food. So she went from being 10 basically to 30. She was an adult instantly. And her little brother came to live with her a little bit later, and she was helping to raise him. So she never really got that childhood because she went into, an adult mode. So when I saw her, she had moved out of the house. She was older. She had gotten married, kids. She already had grandkids, and her grandchildren kept asking her to come outside and play with her. And she just didn't understand why, or like what the meaning behind that was. And I told her, I was like, well, they just want you to go out there. She said, well, I've got dishes to wash and I have all this other stuff. And at the time, the consultation room that we had overlooked a pond that's in the back of our hospital facility. And there's geese there all the time. And she's just looking at me and she's like, I don't know why, but I kind of want to go chase those geese. I was like, all right, let's go on a field trip. I'm like, geese are mean, they bite. I don't know what we're doing, but I took her out to the pond. And we're standing there in front of all these geese, and she's just looking at me. I said, well, go chase them. And she's like, well, I don't know how to do it. And I'm like, great. Now she's looking at me like I'm going to like die by geese because I'm trying to help this patient chase them. So I was like, all right, well, you have to run like a little kid. So I start flailing my arms and legs around. I start chasing the geese, and she follows me, and she's having a great time. She's laughing. And the next time I saw her, she's sitting down. She's got this big smile on her face. And I said, well, what's going on? She's like, guess what? She's like, I didn't do the dishes. I chased my grandkids outside. So even just like that it always touches my heart because I just love that so much. She was able to tap into basically that 10-year-old that she left behind and chase after her grandchildren. So, that playtime is so important, and it's definitely a way for us to connect with people. And even too, just with that connection. And during the pandemic, people were having such a hard time during that time. And I decided during my quarantine days, because even our department was at home for about 3.5 months. And my house was really clean because on my lunch break, I cleaned the house. So I had nothing to do after work. The dog got walked multiple times and he was tired of looking at me. So I decided to take out a bunch of note cards, and I wrote personal notes to a bunch of my family and friends and just mailed it to them. So when they went out to the mailbox, because I think all of us went out to the mailbox at least half a dozen times a day to see what might be in there and to get some fresh air, they actually had something other than an advertisement. They had just a personal note. And I had some people that wrote me back, and we kind of became pen pals that way for a while. Others just sent me a text and said, thank you so much. That brightened my day. So it's really looking at, how you can connect with other people. And then, getting that physical time in. And it doesn't have to be a rigorous workout or anything that way. But it is really looking at, okay, what can I do to make sure that I am taking care of my body? Do I go out for walks? If I don't have the energy or really strength to go outside and walk or get to the gym, what can I do in my house? Is there something that I can do on the couch? There's a lot of like chair yoga or different exercises. Even our physical therapy team are great. I've had some patients that go up there and say, no, I'm not seeing you guys, but do you have some exercise that I can do just on my own? And they're fantastic with helping people get the tools that they need. Time in. So really making sure that you're taking time to focus on yourself, getting internal. So we say time in, that's really, talking about that, body scan that I mentioned earlier. What's happening in my body right now? How am I breathing? Where does my stress live? That downtime, that really non-focused without a specific goal, just allowing your mind to kind of daydream or wander. Not so much that zoning out in front of the TV feeling or zoning out in front of the TV, but really consciously allowing yourself to just relax and not think or worry. Well, I shouldn't say not worry about anything. We tend to still worry, but allowing yourself to decompress. And then that sleep, going back to that sleep hygiene I was talking about earlier, making sure that you're getting enough adequate sleep to help you throughout the day so that you're recuperating. Even if you're going through treatment, it's giving yourself that permission to take a break, or if you need a little nap in the afternoon. However, you want to make sure too that that doesn't interrupt your sleep schedule where you're then not sleeping at night, and then you're up and everything is interrupted. So that is, something to be cautious about, but definitely a very important aspect. And here are some basic, very quick self-care techniques you can actually do. The majority of them in the car, actually, if you're sitting at the red light or you're waiting for the freight train to go by, or sitting in traffic. The thymus tap. The thymus is a little gland right where your collarbones meet. And if you just take a few fingers and tap it very gently, that helps to stimulate the T cells in your body, which impact the immune system. I had one patient I taught this to, and she was with her husband and her brother, and they were like beating their chest when I showed them. I'm like, you do not need to beat it that hard. So I say it's just you lightly on your fingertips, kind of like, if you were going to touch a child or a pet, you're not going to hit them really hard, but it's just a gentle little tap. I actually have a bus driver that during cold and flu season, this is one of his favorite things he does. The first sneeze he hears, he's like, I was tapping my thalamus just to make sure that everything is in working order for me and I'm going to be okay. And the quick coherence technique is another one that is very nice. So this is actually done by a company called HeartMath, and they really look at the heart rates with your breathing and getting those things in sync. So even your blood pressure and everything. This is actually a technique I use with a lot of my patients, especially if they have a lot of anxiety. So I'll invite them to put one hand on their chest and one on their belly and start breathing into your hands and really focusing on, your heart rates and that breathing. And then as you're breathing, you start thinking about something positive, a loving feeling, a great memory, maybe someone that brings you a lot of peace and comfort. And in doing that, that really helps to slow down your breathing. It decreases the heart rate so that everything starts getting in sync again. And that's, something that can take a minute, or you might find that you like it so much that you do it for, 5 to 10 minutes. But it definitely brings you right back into balance quickly, especially when you're stressed or pressured, worried. It's right before scans and you're already feeling that anxiety, whatever it might be, so that you can start to refocus and reconnect to yourself. And this last one, the ear massage, I always tell people this is your party trick. So definitely as you're preparing to get together with family over the holidays, this will be a fun one to do at the dinner table before you guys all start eating. So what I'm going to invite you to do is, and I'll do it with you, in your chair, I'm going to have you look over your left shoulder and see how far you can look, and then do the same on your right. And now I'm going to have you just massage your ears, rub them for about a minute. And as you're rubbing them, just make sure that you're continuing to breathe. You're focusing on just yourself, your body. All right, and when you're done, I'm going to have you look over your left shoulder again and your right shoulder, and come back to center. And hopefully you saw that your range of motion has increased at least a little bit. So with that, we hold a lot of our stress and tension in our neck area, and there's actually acupressure points in our ears that help to release the tension in those muscles. So being able to massage them allows that stress to start to relax and melt away from you. And then it also increases your range of motion, which is also another very nice benefit since we tend to not look behind us anymore. We have our backup cameras in our cars, or we're staring at our phones all the time. So this is really a nice one too, to say, oh, let me look at the world around me. And that will also help your eyes too. You take a break from looking at that screen, helps to decrease the strain on your eyes, which can help preserve your vision as well. And that is all I have. So I want to thank you for your time. If you have any questions or need things further explained, you are more than welcome to reach out to our Cancer Fighters team. They can always get a hold of me or get me in touch with you so that I can further assist you. Otherwise, thank you for joining me, and I hope you have wonderful holidays.